The goblin city of Grax stood deep beneath the mountain range that separated the western kingdoms from the human territories. For 300 years, the goblins had worked in secret. Their greatest engineers had spent generations building something that would change everything. The machine was called the Breath Stealer. It was massive. It was terrible. And today, it was finally complete. Chief Engineer Scrix stood before the controls with his chest puffed out proudly. Around him, thousands of goblins waited in silence. The underground chamber was filled with clicking machines and spinning gears. Pipes ran along the walls like metal veins. Steam hissed from joints and valves. The heart of the machine glowed with a sickly green light that made the shadows dance. Scrix turned to address his people. His voice echoed through the chamber. He spoke of revenge. He spoke of centuries of humans pushing goblins underground. He spoke of stolen lands and broken treaties. The humans had taken everything from them. Now the goblins would take the very air from human lungs. The machine worked on a simple but deadly principle. It would release a special gas into the atmosphere. This gas would spread across the sky and change the composition of the air itself. Humans needed their precious oxygen to survive. The Breath Stealer would slowly replace that oxygen with something else. Something that goblins could breathe just fine. Something that would kill every human on the surface within 3 weeks. Scrix pulled the main lever. The machine roared to life. The ground shook. Green smoke began pouring from vents that reached up through the mountain. The goblins cheered and celebrated. After 300 years of planning and building, their revenge had begun. On the surface, Farmer Thomas Wells was working in his field when he noticed something strange. The sky was changing color. It started at the horizon, a thin line of green that spread like ink in water. Within an hour, the entire sky had turned a poisonous shade of green. The sun looked sick behind that strange color. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest that he had never experienced before. Across the human kingdoms, panic spread faster than the green sky itself. People rushed indoors. Scientists scrambled to understand what was happening. Soldiers stood helpless with their swords and shields because this was not an enemy they could fight. The royal councils met in emergency sessions. Messengers rode between cities with terrible news. People were already getting sick. The very young and very old were dying first. Within 2 days, the human leaders received word from goblin messengers. The goblins sent their terms openly. They wanted the humans to suffer, knowing exactly what was killing them. The message was simple: surrender all lands. Become slaves to the Goblin Empire. Or die gasping for breath as the sky itself turned against them. Most of the noble lords wanted to surrender. What choice did they have? They could not fight the air. They could not swing swords at the sky. Their armies were useless. Their walls meant nothing. This was the end of humanity, unless they submitted to goblin rule. But the human scientists had a different idea. They gathered in the great University of Thornwall, the center of human knowledge. Among them was a young woman named Elena Forge. She was not noble-born. She was the daughter of a blacksmith who had shown remarkable talent for understanding how things worked. She had studied chemistry, engineering, and the natural sciences. And she believed there was a way to fight back. Elena proposed something that seemed impossible. If the goblins had built a machine to poison the sky, then humans could build a machine to clean it. They just needed to work fast. They needed to work together. And they needed to believe that human determination could overcome any obstacle. The nobles thought she was mad. 3 weeks was not enough time to solve a problem that goblins had spent 3 centuries creating. But the common people listened differently. Blacksmiths, farmers, miners, and craftsmen heard Elena's words and felt something stir inside them. Hope, defiance, the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. Word spread through the kingdoms. Volunteers arrived at Thornwall by the thousands. They brought tools, materials, and their own 2 hands. Elena organized them with military precision. She drew blueprints for a machine she called the Sky Cleaner. It would work on the opposite principle of the Goblin device. It would pull the poisonous gas from the atmosphere and replace it with clean air. The work began immediately. Shifts ran day and night without stopping. Blacksmiths forged metal components until their hammers wore down to stumps. Carpenters built frameworks until their hands bled. Miners brought ore from the depths of the earth. Farmers donated their grain to feed the workers. Mothers brought water and bandages to those who collapsed from exhaustion but refused to stop. Deep beneath the mountains, Chief Engineer Scrix watched the surface through his spyglasses with growing satisfaction. The human cities were in chaos. Their hospitals overflowed. Their graveyards expanded. The plan was working perfectly. He estimated that half the human population would be dead within 2 weeks. The rest would surrender or die shortly after. But Scrix noticed something strange on the 7th day. The humans were building something in the fields outside Thornwall. Something large. He adjusted his spyglass and squinted at the structure taking shape. Towers of metal rose from the ground. Pipes connected to strange chambers. Workers swarmed over the construction like ants on a hill. Scrix laughed at what he saw. The humans were trying to fight back with technology. How foolish. How desperately human. They could never match Goblin engineering. They had only days to live, and they were wasting their final hours on a hopeless project. Elena worked without sleep for 4 days straight. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook from exhaustion. But she refused to rest. She solved problems that seemed impossible. When a component failed, she invented a new one. When a design proved flawed, she created a better approach. Her mind worked faster than it ever had before, driven by the knowledge that millions of lives depended on her success. On the 10th day, the Sky Cleaner was ready for testing. It stood 300 feet tall, a monument to human determination. Its core contained special crystals that Elena had designed to attract and neutralize the Goblin poison. Its fans could process massive amounts of air. Its filters would catch what the crystals missed. The test failed. The machine worked, but it was too slow. At its current rate, it would take months to clean the sky. The humans did not have months. They barely had days. Elena stared at the numbers with hollow eyes. She had failed. All their work, all their sacrifice, and it was not enough. Some of the workers fell to their knees and wept. Others simply walked away in silence. The nobles said they had known all along that surrender was the only option. But Elena refused to quit. She went back to her calculations. She studied them again and again, looking for something she had missed. And in the darkest hour of the 12th day, she found it. The machine needed a catalyst, something to accelerate the reaction, something that burned hot and bright enough to power the crystals at maximum efficiency. Lightning. The solution was almost poetic. The goblins had tried to take the sky from humanity. Now humans would use the sky itself to strike back. Elena modified the Sky Cleaner to attract lightning during storms. The electrical energy would supercharge the crystals and increase the machine's efficiency 100-fold. The only problem was that there were no storms. The sky remained that sick green color without a single cloud. The poison had disrupted normal weather patterns. Elena had an answer for that too. She sent riders to every corner of the human kingdoms with instructions for building smaller versions of a different device. These machines would heat the air and create artificial updrafts. Hundreds of them working together could generate storm conditions. It would require coordination across thousands of miles. Every human settlement would need to participate at exactly the same moment. The message that spread was simple. On the dawn of the 14th day, every human alive needed to activate their storm generators simultaneously. Whether they believed it would work or not, whether they were sick or healthy, whether they had hope or despair in their hearts. All of humanity needed to act as one. Chief Engineer Scrix received reports about the human plan and dismissed it as fantasy. No species could coordinate action on such a scale. Humans were divided by borders, languages, and old hatreds. They would fail, as they always did, because they could not work together. He was wrong. When the sun rose on the 14th day, every human settlement from the smallest village to the largest city activated their storm generators. Farmers, soldiers, children, and elders all played their part. The heat rose in columns across the entire continent. The atmosphere began to shift. Winds stirred where there had been stillness. Clouds formed where there had been only green poison. The storm that built was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It covered the entire sky from horizon to horizon. Thunder rolled like the drums of war. And then the lightning came. Bolt after bolt struck the sky cleaner. Elena stood at the controls as electricity surged through the machine. The crystals blazed with light so bright that people had to shield their eyes. The fans spun at maximum speed. The filters roared with activity. The poisonous green began to fade. Deep beneath the mountain, Chief Engineer Scrix watched in horror as his 300-year plan collapsed in a matter of hours. The sky was clearing. The humans were surviving. His people's greatest achievement was being undone by creatures that lived less than a century each. Scrix ordered the breath stealer to increase its output. The Goblin engineers pushed their machine to its limits. Green smoke poured from the vents faster than ever before. But it was not enough. The sky cleaner matched them and exceeded them. For every unit of poison the goblins released, the humans neutralized too. The breath stealer began to overheat. Warning lights flashed across the goblin control panels. Engineers shouted in panic. Scrix screamed at them to keep pushing, to never surrender, to remember their centuries of planning and sacrifice. The machine exploded. The mountain itself cracked from the force of the blast. Tunnels collapsed. The great goblin city of Grax fell into ruins. Those who survived fled deeper underground. Their dreams of conquest turned to ash and rubble. On the surface, the humans watched as the sky returned to its natural blue. They breathed deep and tasted clean air for the first time in 2 weeks. The sick began to recover. The dying found strength to live. Elena Forge became a legend. Songs were written about her determination. But she always said that the victory belonged to everyone. Every human who refused to surrender. Every worker who built until their hands bled. Every parent who gave their children hope when there seemed to be none. The nobles wanted revenge on the goblins. They wanted to hunt them to extinction. But Elena argued for a different path. The humans would seal the mountain passes and build watchers to guard against future attacks. They would not become conquerors themselves. They would simply endure, as humans always had. In the centuries that followed, the other species of the world looked at humanity with new eyes. These creatures lived short lives and seemed weak compared to older races. But they had defeated an enemy that had prepared for 300 years by working together for 2 weeks. They had turned their own stubbornness into a weapon more powerful than any machine. The goblins never forgot their defeat. But they also never stopped fearing the species that could accomplish the impossible when they stood united. Because that was the great secret of humanity. They were at their strongest when the darkness seemed absolute. They burned brightest when the world tried to snuff them out. And the sky remained blue, watching over them all.